So let's dive right into a big question, one you've probably heard debated a bunch of times. Is psychology a real science? Some people just wave it off as common sense, while others will defend it to the hilt. Today, we're going to cut through all that noise, actually look at the evidence, and figure out what's really going on. This right here is the heart of the matter, isn't it? Oh, that's just common sense. It's such an easy way to dismiss something. But think about it. Is understanding the incredible complexity of the human mind, our thoughts, our emotions, is that really so simple? Let's actually put that idea to the test. All right, so let's get these common myths right out on the table. First, that psychology isn't a real science. Then there's the idea that it's all just pseudoscience, like astrology or something. And of course, the classic, that psychologists are basically mind readers. To figure out if any of this holds water, we've got to start with a basic question. What even is science? Okay, so if we're going to judge psychology, we need a standard to measure it against, right? We need to lay down the rules of the game. So what exactly makes a science a science? Let's build ourselves a little checklist. At its very core, the word science comes from scientia, which is just Latin for knowledge. And this is the important part, it's not just about collecting random facts. It's a process. It's a disciplined, systematic way of understanding the world, and it all has to be built on a foundation of evidence. So, here it is. This is our scientific checklist. First up, empirical evidence. This means it has to be based on things you can actually observe and measure, not just someone's opinion. Then objectivity. You have to try your best to see the facts as they are, without your own biases getting in the way. Next, scientific causality. Science is always hunting for cause and effect. If I do X, what happens to Y? Then we have systematic exploration, which just means you follow a clear step-by-step plan. And this next one is huge, replication. If you do an experiment, someone else should be able to follow your steps and get the same results. If they can't, something's fishy. And finally, predictability. A good science should help us explain why things happen and even make solid predictions about what might happen next. This is the gold standard we're going to use. So, how did psychology even get here? Did it just pop into existence one day? Or did it have to fight its way into becoming a science? Let's take a look at its origin story. Psychology's story actually starts way back with the ancient Greeks as a part of philosophy. They were the first ones really asking big questions about the mind. But the real game changer, the moment everything shifted, was in 1879. That's when a guy named Wilhelm Wundt set up the very first psychology laboratory. That was it. That was the official birth of psychology as its own separate science. And after that, things really took off. You had Freud digging into the unconscious, and then behaviorism came along and got super scientific, focusing only on behavior you could actually see and measure. All right, so if psychology follows the rules of science, how does it actually do the science? What kind of tools are psychologists using to get that empirical evidence we were talking about? Think about it. Every science needs its instruments. An astronomer has a telescope, a chemist has beakers and burners. For psychologists, the tools are a set of really rigorous research methods, all designed to collect objective data about how we think and act. So let's open up that toolkit and see what's inside. Okay, the heavy hitter. The gold standard in the toolkit is the experimental method. This is how psychologists nail down that cause and effect relationship. So, for example, if you wanted to test a new way of studying, you could have one group use the new technique, that's your variable, and have a control group stick to the old way. Then you'd compare their test scores. See? That directly gets at that scientific causality piece from our checklist. And then you've got the survey method. You've probably filled out a questionnaire or two in your life. Well, this is a super powerful tool for researchers. It lets them gather a whole bunch of data from thousands of people really efficiently, which is awesome for spotting broad trends and how people think or feel about something. And the toolkit doesn't stop there. There's also the observation method, which is pretty much what it sounds like. A researcher carefully watching behavior, maybe kids on a playground. And then there's the case study, where they do a super deep dive into one person or a small group. You can get some incredible insights from that, which often leads to bigger studies down the road. But what happens when you just can't run an experiment? I mean, sometimes it's impossible, or it would be totally unethical, right? You can't just tell a group of people, hey, go smoke for 20 years so we can see what happens. Of course not. So in cases like that, psychologists look for relationships, or what they call correlations, between things that are already out there in the world. This table breaks it down nicely. A positive correlation is when two things move together, like the more hours you study, the higher your exam score tends to be. A negative correlation is when they move in opposite directions. The more hours you spend scrolling on your phone at night, the worse your sleep quality might be. But, and this is maybe the most important rule in all of science, correlation does not prove causation. Just because two things are connected doesn't mean one is causing the other. That is a crucial distinction. Okay, so we've looked at the evidence, the history, the tools, but let's be real. It's not always a simple, straightforward story. It's time to tackle the challenges head on, and then we'll talk about the real payoff, why having a scientific psychology matters to all of us. It's really important to be honest here. Psychology faces some unique challenges. I mean, compared to a science like physics, it's still pretty young. It doesn't really have a single universal law like the law of gravity. Instead, there are a bunch of different theories and perspectives. And let's face it, its main subject, us, human beings, is ridiculously complex and always changing. We're just way less predictable than a chemical reaction in a beaker. So with all those challenges, you might be wondering, what's the point? Why go through all the trouble of being scientific? Well, it all boils down to one incredibly powerful concept, rationality. The whole point of studying the mind scientifically is to give us a real evidence-based roadmap for being better thinkers, making better judgments, and making better decisions. And that, right there, is the real-world value for you and me. The goal isn't just for scientists to publish fancy papers. The payoff is that this science gives all of us a reliable framework for thinking more clearly, for understanding ourselves, and ultimately for improving our own lives. And check this out, this RATION framework is a fantastic, practical way to see this in action. It's how you can take these big scientific ideas and use them every day. For example, take the R for realism, seeing things as they really are. What is that? That's just a personal application of scientific objectivity, one of the key features from our checklist. It's about basing your decisions on evidence, not just on feelings or wishful thinking. So what's the final verdict? Well, while psychology definitely faces its own unique set of challenges, its deep commitment to the scientific method, to evidence, to objectivity, to careful, systematic work is what makes it a science. And that's what makes it so valuable. It absolutely earns its spot at the table by helping us to truly understand ourselves and make better choices. And that really brings us to the final, most important thought. Knowing this stuff is one thing, but using it is everything. The real value here is putting these tools to work. So I'll just leave you with this to chew on. Now that you know about these tools, how are you going to apply a little more rationality in your own life? Maybe even today.